2024 had the most active tornado season in decades. So in this video, I thought it'd be fun to check out all the major outbreaks that occurred that year, the backstory behind them all, what we did covering those outbreaks, and more. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So here we are on the Tornadoes of 2024 Wikipedia page, and something interesting to note that the article here touches on is that 2024 started off well below average. If you guys remember, we did not have a lot of severe weather coverage streams in the beginning portion of the year. There also was not a hugely active winter storm season in early 2024, so weather was quite boring for the first few months of the year. Now, it kind of remained that way until April. However, we did have a few smaller events that ended up happening in the early portion of 2024. We had a strong EF3 tornado that ended up impacting areas like Panama City, Florida. This ended up devastating homes and businesses. We also had a decently strong tornado ravage portions of Georgia. Around a month later, on February 4th, a surprise tornado outbreak off of a marginal risk day prompted an EF2 tornado to strike the city of Valdosta, Georgia, and we also had several other tornadoes that day of weaker intensity. Now, not all of these outbreaks in the early portion of the year were in the Deep South. We actually had the first ever Wisconsin February tornado and the second ever February Wisconsin tornado on February 8th, 2024. Now, I was devastated that we weren't live for this one because this had been such a boring season so far, and we really didn't have many coverage streams out, but unfortunately, I couldn't go live. I was at a band thing, and this ended up happening, and I got home, and I saw that there was a PDS tornado warning for sections of Wisconsin, and I was so sad that I was not able to go live for this, because this was quite a massive event, even if it was not a slow year to begin with, right? Look at this. This was a metal outbuilding destroyed at high-end EF2 intensity near Evansville, Wisconsin. You can make the case for this being an EF3 tornado. It was very long tracking. It did not only hit the town of Evansville, but it also went through areas like Porter, Wisconsin, and more. So after that, things kind of calmed down for a while, although towards the end of February, we did have a smaller scale tornado outbreak across sections of the Midwest. We had a few EF2 tornadoes across sections of Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and Kentucky, but the setup for this day was quite interesting. If we take a look at the actual SPC outlook here for February 27th, 2024, we can see that it was actually quite interesting because we had two enhanced risks of severe weather on this day, one of them being for sections of northeastern Illinois, southeastern Wisconsin, and northwestern Indiana, and the other being for sections of southeast Missouri, southern Illinois, northern Kentucky, southern Indiana, and southwestern Ohio. These were both driven by 10% hatch tornado risks, and it was looking like this outbreak was going to be even more potent than what ended up playing out. So things could have gone a lot worse here. Fun fact, I was only under a marginal risk of severe weather this day towards the end, but I was actually under a tornado warning myself this day. This is pretty interesting. It was around midnight. We had a discrete supercell, as many of you will remember, that tracked all the way from portions of Missouri back through areas like Ohio, producing tornadoes and damaging winds along the way, and I was under a tornado warning for that supercell, which is pretty interesting. But going back to the Wikipedia page here again, we had a few smaller scale outbreaks across different sections of the world. We actually did have an EF0 tornado in California, which isn't super uncommon for wintertime, but this was a later season one than usual, so that's pretty interesting to know. On March 9th, we had a small-scale tornado event across portions of Dixie Alley. There was a pretty significant tornado that did end up hitting the Nahunta, Georgia area. We were live for this one. We also had a strong tornado the night before in sections of southeastern Alabama, but we can see this tornado near Nahunta, Georgia did cause some significant damage to homes and businesses. It was close to an EF3 rating. It did end up with that EF2 rating, though, with winds of 130 miles per hour. Again, the night before, an EF1 tornado touched down near Ozark, Alabama. I was not live for that because it was at about 2 a.m., but I actually did see it as it happened, which was pretty interesting. Now, we get to the first big tornado outbreak of the year. This is the first one that I would call historic, okay? We had several devastating tornadoes on March 13th, 14th, and 15th of 2024. I have a full documentary video on that if you guys want to check that out. It's not very good. It was a long time ago, but if you guys are interested in this outbreak, I think that would be something of interest to you. So we did end up having a strong tornado of EF3 intensity hitting the town of Wapakoneta, Ohio, and also an EF3 tornado hit Winchester, Indiana. Now, again, those were both on March 15th, I believe, or March 14th, rather. But March 13th also brought a very strong tornado to Alta Vista, Kansas, that got rated high-end EF2 intensity. It was PDS, and we were live for that one as well. Here is a picture of damage from Selma, Indiana of high-end EF2 level intensity. There were definitely better photos that they could have used here. There was significant damage to a Taco Bell at EF3 intensity near Winchester, Indiana. But overall, several devastating PDS tornadoes did touch down this day. In total, we had 34 different tornadoes touch down in this outbreak, which is quite significant. We ended up seeing 34 confirmed tornadoes according to this section of the article. I believe that is what we just counted up, so that makes sense. But we also had 4 fatalities and 69 injuries, so very significant outbreak. Now, we did have the April 1st through 3rd tornado outbreak. It was mostly an April 3rd kind of thing here, an April 2nd thing, but we did end up seeing a few strong tornadoes across sections of the Ohio Valley. Again, though, this was a day that definitely could have gone much worse. We actually had a moderate risk of tornadoes, 15% hatch tornado risk for sections of the eastern Ohio Valley. So the fact that we did not have any EF3 or greater tornadoes is quite surprising. Usually whenever we do have those moderate risk days, we end up seeing something like that. But in total, we actually ended up seeing over 80 tornadoes this day, which is still very significant, even if most of them weren't very strong. This was the El Dorado, Illinois tornado damage that we ended up seeing. This was the strongest tornado to hit the state of Illinois in 2024. This ended up causing significant damage to areas like mobile homes, manufactured homes, stuff like that. Again, a 15% hatch tornado risk went out for sections of Ohio and Kentucky, as well as West Virginia, I believe. And there actually was a pretty significant derecho on that day that ended up causing significant damaging winds in parts of Ohio and West Virginia as well. So after that, the April 9th through 11th outbreak ended up impacting sections of Dixie Alley. Again, nothing really too interesting. We did have a few strong tornadoes across sections of Texas. Something pretty interesting to note is this is Port Arthur, Texas, that got hit by a EF2 tornado on this day. But later in this video, if you guys have been keeping up with severe weather recently, you'll know that a much stronger tornado ended up hitting Port Arthur as well. So remember to come back to that one. We did have a 15% hatch tornado risk again for this event, so it was just another big underperforming event. I believe we even had a PDS tornado watch this day, if I'm not mistaken. But we go a little bit further down, we see April 16th through the 18th. We had a little bit of a surprise tornado outbreak across sections of the plains in the United States. We had 2 EF2 tornadoes, 19 EF1s, 22 EF0s, and 7 that went unrated. This mainly ended up impacting areas like Nebraska, Kansas, and South Dakota, but the highest risks were put in place by the SPC for areas like Iowa, Illinois, and Missouri, and we did end up seeing some significant hail and damaging winds in those regions, but the greatest tornadoes came from, again, sections of the plains there, right? So after that, we can see we've got the April 19th mention here of the Rusty Point, Alaska tornado. The reason this is so significant is because this was the 5th ever Alaskan tornado, a very, very brief, like couple second landspout touchdown near Rusty Point, Alaska there. Look at that little skinny guy. It was pretty interesting because, again, this was also the first Alaskan tornado recorded in 19 years, which is pretty interesting. So after that, we get to where the year started to pick up. So again, everything from this point before was pretty lackluster, pretty unnoteworthy. But here's where things start to take a turn for the worse. The April 25th through April 28th outbreak. April 25th wasn't anything crazy. However, April 26th was a massive day in tornadic history for parts of Nebraska and Iowa. We had an EF3 tornado near Lincoln, Nebraska. We also had an EF3 tornado near Waverly, Nebraska. And we even had an EF4 tornado near Elkhorn, Nebraska that ended up prompting a tornado emergency, which we were live for that. It was on the ground for so long. It was very devastating. It was a massive wedge tornado, well over a mile wide. Caused significant damage. Luckily, only ended up causing 1 fatality, miraculously. We also had the very strong high-end EF3 Minden, Iowa tornado that day. Luckily, it was in a mostly rural region, but it didn't end up devastating a few towns. And then April 27th was arguably even worse. We had an EF4 tornado end up hitting Marietta, Oklahoma. We had a high-end EF3 tornado hit Sulphur, Oklahoma. And that night was insane. That was one of the nights where, unfortunately, I couldn't go live. I wasn't home. But we had high-end EF3 tornadoes left, right, and center with that event. And again, even a low-end EF4 tornado near Marietta. This is a picture from a Dollar Tree that was absolutely obliterated. There were towns being hit by strong tornadoes multiple times. There were tornadoes ravaging counties over and over again. It was a very significant and devastating outbreak that night. It was PDS after PDS after PDS tornado. Some of the strongest tornadoes that we've seen in the year of 2024, which is crazy to think about. Overall, this outbreak had 164 tornadoes, caused 6 fatalities, and more than 150 injuries, which is very devastating once again. So after that, we had the little less notable, but still pretty significant tornado outbreak from April 30th to May 4th. This was where we had the Westmoreland, Kansas tornado. This was a high-end EF3, or excuse me, a low-end EF3 drill bit tornado that we were live for, I believe. On radar, it didn't look like anything super impressive, but again, this was a very significant tornado that ended up significantly damaging homes and businesses. Here is actual radar imagery of a tornado genesis here, basically the action of a tornado being created, if you're not aware of what that is, near Hollister, Oklahoma. This tornado was actually very strong, and it did end up only getting rated EF1, but it was very, very strong. The only reason it was an EF1 is because it was in a pretty rural area there. So after that, we kind of scroll through here. We have the May 6th through May 10th outbreak. Now, this could go down as one of the most significant tornado outbreaks of 2024. This was the day that we had the historic Barnsdall tornado on May 6, 2024. A high risk of severe weather was issued for sections of Oklahoma and Kansas, which, if you're not aware, is a 5 out of 5 maxed out rating on the SPC scale here. And things were relatively calm that day until the lower level jet kicked in and we had a significant wedge tornado hit Barnsdall, Oklahoma directly. Again, we were live for this. A tornado emergency was issued. It devastated the entire town of Barnsdall, Oklahoma, and even impacted sections of Bartlesville, Oklahoma, which is a much bigger city, however, only at EF2 intensity, right? So on May 7th, we had another significant tornado outbreak across sections of the Ohio Valley and the Midwest. This was the day where we had another tornado emergency for parts of southwestern Michigan, the first ever Michigan tornado emergency in history. This was one that ended up hitting areas like Union City, Michigan, which is obviously devastating to see. Again, we were live for it. This was on a day where we had a 10% hatched risk for tornadoes across sections of the Ohio Valley. But again, most of the activity actually ended up occurring in Michigan, which is not what we were expecting at all. So after that, we're not done. May 8th, we had another tornado emergency. And remember, guys, this was 3 days in a row at this point. This one was a significant tornado in central Tennessee that ended up hitting the town of Columbia head-on. It also impacted areas like Spring Hill, Tennessee. All right, this was a low-end EF3 tornado that ended up slamming homes and businesses out there in central Tennessee. Obviously, a very populated area, so pretty devastating to see stuff like that in that region. But that's not it. 4th day in a row, we had a tornado emergency for Hennegar and Hammondville, Alabama, for an EF3 tornado in northeastern Alabama. We also had a strong tornado north of Huntsville, Alabama on that day that prompted a PDS tornado warning. This was around midnight from May 7th into May 8th. Again, just absolutely crazy to see, or May 8th through May 9th, rather. Again, very devastating stuff. This was a long-lasting tornado outbreak. Again, this was stretched all the way from May 6th to May 10th here. Again, we ended up having nearly 200 tornadoes this day, only 8 fatalities total, which, again, obviously that's still horrible to see, but definitely not nearly as bad as it could have been. A lot of these tornadoes, again, ended up getting those warnings out very far ahead of time, so good on the National Weather Service for that one. On May 10th here, we did have an EF2 tornado in Australia that damaged about 100 homes, including 7 that were declared uninhabitable and injuring 2 people there. Pretty interesting to see. Then we had, again, a few more small-scale tornado outbreaks here, May 13th through the 14th, just a few tornadoes down in the Deep South. We did have a very significant mesoscale convective system move through portions of Louisiana that ended up causing some 100-mile-an-hour wind gusts even at the surface near Lake Charles, Louisiana, which we were live for. We also did end up seeing several strong tornadoes on that day once again. Now, after this, we had the historic Houston derecho, which was big for a damaging wind threat, and again, we were live for that. The tornado threat really wasn't anything to write home about, though. We did have a few weaker tornadoes impact sections of southern Louisiana and southeastern Texas there. Here's pictures of damage near Romeoville, Louisiana from a tornado, so pretty interesting to see. Now, we get back to the higher-end tornado outbreaks here with the May 19th through the 27th outbreak. And this was the outbreak where we had one of the strongest tornadoes in history, the Greenfield, Iowa tornado. If you guys aren't aware, this tornado ended up recorded with wind speeds of over 300 miles per hour by a Doppler on wheels. It was a high-end EF4 tornado that ended up directly hitting the town of Greenfield head-on. Yeah, again, a Doppler on wheels recorded 309 to 318 mile per hour wind gusts in a small area between 30 to 50 meters above the surface near Greenfield, making this one of the highest wind speeds ever recorded, not only in a tornado, but just some of the highest wind speeds ever recorded, which is pretty crazy to see. We also had a tornado emergency a few days earlier for Custer City, Oklahoma. This was on May 21st, by the way. I believe I said May 27th. This was actually May 21st. But Custer City, Oklahoma did end up having a significant high-end EF2 tornado on the 23rd, 20th, I believe, or the 19th it is. This was after a slight risk of severe weather was only out for sections of Oklahoma and Texas. But a strong tornado did end up touching down. It was a massive mega wedge, and if it went closer to any significantly populated areas, it could have been a lot worse. We did end up seeing several other strong tornadoes in sections of Iowa, especially on May 21st. We also had some destructive tornadoes in Kentucky on May 25th. We had tornadoes in Texas and Oklahoma that were PDS EF3s. Again, we also had the largest Arkansas tornado of all time near Decatur, Arkansas, that was nearly 2 miles wide. Again, we had so many significant tornadoes from this event. Again, the Crider, Kentucky tornado was very significant. We ended up seeing several tornado emergencies issued for that one supercell. We were live for the entirety of that tornado, I believe. In total, we had 31 fatalities and 240 tornadoes, which is the most out of a singular outbreak that has been recorded from 2024. So, again, if you want to see a documentary on the Greenfield, Iowa tornado, we do have a video on that. We also were live for pretty much all these tornadoes that we mentioned in this section of the article. Again, this was a crazy stretch of severe weather, to say the least. Now, May 30th, we did have a small scale but a strong tornado impact portions of Texas. This was near Midland, Odessa. We did end up seeing a tornado emergency for areas south of Odessa. This was for a high-end, a low-end EF3 tornado. It was a high-end EF2 tornado to the south of Midland, but we did have an EF3 tornado later that day near Midkiff that did end up causing some ground scouring. We were live for this tornado, not whenever it was a tornado emergency, but we were live shortly after for when it was a PDS tornado warning. Again, overall, not a lot of tornadoes in general, but the ones that we did end up having were mostly pretty significant. This was another surprise outbreak. It was on a 5% tornado risk day, but somehow we ended up seeing tornadoes coming out left, right, and center. Again, pictures of significant damage came out from all over sections of western Texas. It was also the first ever tornado emergency issued by the National Weather Service office in Midland, which is pretty interesting. So after that, we had the June 2nd outbreak that ended up impacting sections of the Dakotas here. We also had a strong tornado near Sanderson, Texas. Not too significant, though, outside of that. June 5th, we ended up having another Ohio Valley event here. Parts of Michigan and Ohio ended up seeing some strong tornadoes. We also had a surprise strong tornado in Maryland this day. It was a high-end EF1 tornado. We were live for this. It was PDS. This was a surprise tornado outbreak. We had widespread tornadoes everywhere from Alabama all the way up towards Michigan. Again, a marginal risk day with this tornado outbreak. Most of the areas that we ended up seeing those stronger tornadoes and didn't even have a tornado risk at all. But we did end up seeing a couple of fatalities in parts of Michigan and several injuries in sections of Ohio as well. So after that, a lot of these outbreaks were not in the United States. We saw the June 25th through the 26th outbreak, which the most significant thing here to note would be the high-end EF3 tornado near Whitman, Nebraska. We were live for this. There's a lot of controversy surrounding this tornado because for a good portion of its life cycle, it was completely unwarned. And whenever it was clearly on the ground, it was warned for radar-indicated rotation, which was complete bogus. Again, we were live the whole time for this. We were calling this out on the ground. Again, this was a devastating tornado. There could be arguments made that this was even an EF4 tornado. There were EF4 level wind speeds recorded with this supercell, but anyway, that was kind of the most significant thing that happened on that day. This was also on only a 5% tornado risk day, which is pretty crazy. After that, we get to the hurricane season 2024. We had the Hurricane Beryl tornado outbreak, which at the time was one of the most significant tornado outbreaks from a hurricane of all time. We ended up having a significant tornado near Jasper, Texas. We also had strong tornadoes in sections of Indiana from a hurricane. Yes, the strongest tornado from this event was near Mount Vernon, Indiana. It was an EF3 tornado. Again, we also had tornadoes across sections of Kentucky, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, New York even had some strong tornadoes that were PDS from this event, which is insane that a hurricane could prompt so many significant tornadoes in areas all across the country and everywhere from Texas to New York. Now, after that, we had the July 13th to 16th outbreak. This caused significant tornadoes in upstate New York. We were live for a lot of these. We were not live for the high-end EF2 tornado near Rome, New York. The radar imagery was not super impressive with it, but it did end up being quite a significant tornado here. So a lot of interesting history on that tornado as well that you can check out on YouTube. Hurricane Debbie ended up prompting a somewhat significant but not quite as impressive tornado outbreak as Hurricane Beryl, but we still did end up having some significant tornadoes in parts of the Carolinas. After that, we took a little bit of a break until we got to Hurricane Helene. We had an EF3 tornado that ended up hitting Rocky Mount, North Carolina. It was also the second EF3 tornado that hit that same town within the span of a year and a half, which is pretty crazy. We also had tornadoes in portions of Georgia, and we even had a PDS tornado in parts of Delaware, which is pretty crazy to think about. Now, here we go. This is the biggest hurricane tornado outbreak of 2024. The Hurricane Milton tornado outbreak. This was a very similar day to April 27th, 2024. We had PDS tornado after PDS tornado after PDS tornado all day long. We had dozens of PDS tornadoes. It also holds the record for the most tornado warnings issued in one day in history, which is pretty crazy. It beats out major outbreaks like April 27th, 2011, the 1974 super outbreak. It beats out every single one of them. It was the day with the most tornado warnings in history. We ended up seeing the devastating tornado impacting Fort Pierce, Florida. This was a massive wedge. Around a mile wide, I do believe. We also did end up seeing some lower end EF3 tornadoes in eastern Florida that day. Again, we were live for hours and hours on end for not only the hurricane, but also the tornado outbreak that came with it. After this, we had the November 2nd to 5th tornado outbreak here. We did end up seeing some significant tornadoes in parts of eastern Oklahoma, western Arkansas, and even southern Missouri. We had some significant flooding that ended up causing some fatalities, which I'm going to be completely honest with you, I did not know about. There was obviously quite a bit of controversy surrounding this outbreak as well, as it did take place on Election Day. Most of the significant activity came the day before that, though. Here's a picture of the Little Flock tornado in Arkansas, not Little Rock, Little Flock. This was not a wedge tornado, but a wide cone tornado here in central Arkansas. Then we get to December. So we're getting close to the end here. On December 14th, we had a significant tornado near Scotts Valley, California, that ended up impacting portions of the city. For a while, I honestly thought this was going to get rated a bit higher. It looked very impressive on radar. I believe we were live for this one. I could be wrong about that, though. But it was a very strong tornado that ended up causing about $100,000 in damages at touchdown in the early afternoon hours of December 14th. And then finally, we have the most recent tornado outbreak of 2024, the December 28th through 29th tornado outbreak. And this one was very significant. We had significant tornadoes all the way from Mississippi, through Louisiana, through Arkansas, through Texas. We mentioned Port Arthur, Texas earlier in this video. Again, Port Arthur, Texas had a high-end EF3 tornado impact the downtown region of Port Arthur. It also slabbed areas in Dickinson, Texas. You could argue this should be an EF4 tornado. I think if it went through Port Arthur at its strongest point, it would be an EF4. Something to note with this one is that this tornado was the longest tracking in the entire year of 2024. And by that, I mean it was on the ground for the longest amount of time. It traveled over 50 miles across Texas and Louisiana here and ended up producing multiple other strong tornadoes from the same supercell on that same day, which is pretty crazy to think about. Again, areas in Mississippi got hit very hard by this outbreak. The Bude, Mississippi tornado got rated EF3. It was a massive wedge that was caught by several storm chasers. So that was the most recent outbreak of 2024. So that was the year of 2024's tornado history in review. If you guys did enjoy this video, make sure to like and subscribe. I'm sorry if I was kind of stuttering over my words today. We have not really done a video like this ever. So if you guys like this kind of content, make sure to let me know down in the comment section below. Again, 2025 is going to have an incredibly active tornado season. So if you do want to get notified whenever tornadoes are touching down or are about to touch down in certain sections of the United States, really all over the country we cover, make sure to click that subscribe button because we're going to be here for the every significant tornado of 2025. Again, we've already been live for hours and hours for not only severe weather coverage, but also winter storm and hurricane coverage this year. So again, make sure to click that subscribe button, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.